joining, everybody. Appreciate it. And thank you guys for being on the panel with me. You don't have to do this alone, which is great. We have no presentation today. We're going to keep it conversational. My name is Matt Zeminski. I'm the VP of Partnerships for iFixit.com. We're a free online repair manual. We teach consumers how to do repairs of the products they own. And my job is to work with our partners at the manufacturing level to design and introduce a repair program for their products. We're going to talk, I think, a little bit about the opportunities that exist right now, but we're in a really interesting point because there's a lot of legislation floating out there, a lot of policies being proposed and being enacted that are encouraging, sometimes forcefully, manufacturers to introduce this program. But we're still early enough in this stage that I think there's an opportunity to control the way that it is introduced and to make sure that it's something that is really representative of your brand and how you want your customers to understand repair with your products. Before we get started, I want to allow each of these guys to introduce themselves. Stephen, we'll start with you.
Sure. My name's Stephen Nickel. I'm responsible for reverse logistics, global reverse logistics for all of Google's consumer hardware products, Pixel, Nest, watches, buds, etc.
I'm Colin Ravenscroft. I manage a team of engineers at Microsoft, and we are responsible for the end-to-end process of defining what the repair ability, I guess, of the product is early stage. We're also responsible for writing up service guides and setting up the repair lines in our tier 1 manufacturer as well as our global repair centers.
Hi, I'm Sal Zaman, and I lead the hardware operations logistics teams at Toast, a restaurant technology company that you may see the handhelds at restaurants, over 100,000 restaurants in the US. I also lead the NPI teams and the hardware analytics team at Toast.
Thank you. To start, Sal, I want to direct a question maybe to start with you, and then we'll go down the line here. There's a lot, I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of opportunity with repair and refurbishing right now, but I know in particularly the restaurant industry, which is a space that you operate in, margins are really, really tight. And so how does Toast think about repair and refurbishing in that context, and what do you think the opportunities are for repair and refurbishing in that industry?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm going to be a little contrarian here. We've tried refurbishment. And I was just telling our co-panelists here right before the talk that you have to really be smart about refurbishment, right? The why has to be really understood. And I think that's something that Toast, I've been there 2.5 years, and in fact, not proud to say it, but I actually shut down one of our refurbishment programs. And the reason being, because the why wasn't understood, the business case wasn't understood properly, and it was just being done because somebody thought it was a good idea to save that hardware and those devices from being recycled or scrapped. So, we can get into more of what goes into the why and the strategic reason that refurbishment should occur, but until that is done, I think refurbishment should not be simply just an ESG type of activity or a cost reduction type of activity. It has to be part of the product strategy. It has to have executive sponsorship, and you have to bring all the same rigor and quality standards that you have for your NPI, right? Until you have all of these things, you're not going to be successful at refurbishment. And so that was one of the lessons learned. And now as we are going into the third generation of designing and manufacturing our next generation hardware, we're taking these lessons and trying to build that in. One of the challenges we face in the restaurant industry, as you said, the environment that our devices are used, especially the handhelds, take a lot of abuse. There's a lot of drops. And we're actually designing our hardware to be less repairable in the field. And that may seem, again, contrarian, but we have to do that for added durability. And it's not just the screens, right? There's a card reader, a credit card reader inside the device. So So those are some of the things that we are looking at in order to see how we can actually build refurbishment or refurbishability into the product design and at the product design stage rather than as an afterthought. So
It's interesting you say that. I want to kick it to Colin because Microsoft has an interesting evolution on design for repair and building a repair program. And, you know, I think iFixit, initially when some of the first Surface products came out, we rated them a 0 or a 1 on a scale of 10 for repairability. And then the most recent generation scored an 8. And the steps, you look at each generation, just Microsoft did something after the first generation that said, we're going to build repair into this product. And it is now one of the most repairable products in terms of a consumer-ready laptop or tablet. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. You know, the hardest story to tell, like the hardest business case to make when you're starting out on the journey is ROI, right? You all as product makers here, I think, probably struggle with either the cost, the complexity, like reducing feature count, like maybe you're taking up battery space or increasing the thickness of the product. But there's so much value to be had. And when we started out on that repair journey, we tried to build that ROI story. And the thing that we learned, like we thought that was just going to be, you know, scrap value. But once we started implementing, you know, we didn't go from 0 to 100 in one product. But once we like took those first steps and we started seeing like the huge returns that we actually got, we were able to realize there was a huge commercial market that we weren't able to address with our device sales. That once we had SSD like storage devices available, for instance, we could start selling to government customers and a huge number of commercial customers that didn't consider our products before. It also hit on like our NPI phases. It gave us so much flexibility during NPI to go rework devices and try new things and do DOEs where it was really expensive and time consuming with our previous product designs. So the longer that we've done this, the more areas that we've discovered that have given us value. And it's gone from being something where we were implementing to reduce costs to now something that we're implementing more and more because we're actually generating revenue. We're generating positive revenue for the company because we can reduce scrap costs both in the factory but also like in our retail returns. And that means we can reduce protection plan prices for customers. So it's cheaper for customers and we get more people buying protection plans and we get increased revenue. So it's really a win-win-win situation that the longer we do it, the more that we implement, the more we discover like how valuable it is for us.
And Stephen, Google, I think is fascinating because the approach to repair, you know, enabling consumers to do their own repairs as opposed to relying on an ASP network is interesting. But also, I feel like Google's is similar to Microsoft, such a massive company. How do you shift this thinking internally to develop repair?
Yeah, I can really definitely relate, Colin, to your experiences as well. You know, for us, the consumer hardware business is about a little over 8 years old. And when we started, we looked at it. I think what really helped our argument from a repair point of view is we wanted to be really aligned with Google's overall mission, which is about making information useful and accessible. So we thought, all right, how do you make repair useful and accessible to your customers? And so accessibility, we didn't think it made sense to be doing repairs centrally at factories in Asia. It wasn't a way to make it accessible for customers who want to have repair options where they live and work, so it becomes a very local and a very regional experience, which is a great opportunity to build relationships with your customers, right? To really kind of grow that relationship from the beginning. So we felt that was really important. And you know, I know this audience from a manufacturing environment, the degree of difficulty goes up. Instead of having one factory, now, for example, we partner with U-Break iFix. They have about 700 stores in the US. You've got 700 factories. So how are you able to oversee the quality and the consistency of that? But that leads to the other part of it, how you make repair useful. It's about the partnership you have with the design teams to make repairable products. That's the whole key here to really controlling quality of repair globally as well. You simply have to partner very closely at the earliest stages of concept phases for products and build repairability into at that point so that you can create that type of accessibility that we want for our customers. And we see all those great benefits as well, right? It's more cost effective, quite frankly. You're not replacing cosmetics. You're just replacing what's broken on a customer's phone when you're doing it in person, which has a great sustainability aspect to it as well. There is so much waste in this industry. And if you're able to limit that by being able to repair close to customers and only repairing the component that's broken, that's a great overall experience for the customer, for the business, and for the environment.
Sal, you mentioned before we got on stage just the importance of measuring data as you go on this journey for repair, and you talked about the importance of it having all of you talked about the importance of it having a positive revenue impact. Can you talk a little bit about some of the data points that you're most looking at in a repair and refurbishing program?
Yeah, we're actually trying to, preempt some of the reasons for the returns. I think from our perspective, we actually had a really interesting project that my team was involved in trying to predict defects or field failures before they occur. And that was fascinating because they used like a machine learning model. We have access to all our devices that are out in the field. They're constantly taking payments and sending data back into our system. So having that ability to do that, I think, reduces the need for refurbishment later on. If you can send in the part or send a message to that customer saying, we're going to send a tech out and get this repaired for you, as before the customer even realizes it, I think there's real value in that. So the data environment is really rich. What we are trying to build is the systems to take advantage of this data, right? And having all this data, there's people that talk about, data as the new sort of frontier. It is, but companies of our size right now, we are a little behind in getting all the systems ready to take advantage of this data. And that's the journey we're on right now, is we are trying to collect we're trying to build like a QMS system. We're trying to connect that to our ERP, and so that is where the value of all of this will, I think, come to fruition.
Any other thoughts on data collection and repair?
Yeah, I guess I would start out by saying that, our goal is always same quality level after repair that a customer would expect from a fresh device. So we have similar metrics for devices coming out of our repair centers that we would coming out of our like tier 1 factory. I think the metrics that we use to like really push ourselves forward are like our turnaround time for our customers, and our customer satisfaction. So those are things that are a little bit harder to gather than quality data out of the factory, right? But we keep pushing ourselves on like, how can we improve our turnaround time? How can we get our repair closer to the customer so they have less downtime, so they have a better experience, get up and going as quickly as possible, which is why we've really, focused in recent years on getting spare parts out to customers and building relationships with corporate repair partners who can be everywhere our customers are when we necessarily can't be. Like Steve mentioned, we don't want to just have one repair facility in China or whatever it is, because that creates an awful experience for the customer. Even though they're getting a perfect device back, it's still not a good experience. So I would say that we're just super customer driven and like try to get the metrics around what's the customer experience, and that drives a lot of the engineering and quality for our own internal metrics.
Yeah, very, very similar. And we look at the big three, which is speed, quality, and satisfaction. TAT, your turnaround time is your speed metric. Bounce, or how many times a repair comes back, is your quality piece, and then customer satisfaction scores. But lately, we've been really, really focused on the idea of same-day repair. What percentage of our customers globally can get, especially when you're looking at a device like a phone, you can't live without it for any period of time. So we really focus on how do we make it possible for customers anywhere to be able to get repair support that same day if that's what they need.
A little bit of a tangent. It's funny, both of you mentioned this priority of getting customers repair basically on their terms, right, and to their satisfaction. My first introduction to living in the Bay Area was working for an on-demand cell phone repair company, kind of like early stage Uber. And then my most recent job was here in Alameda, and I was doing on-demand appliance repair for Samsung, managing operations. So I understand that those customers are demanding, and those are challenging problems to solve. I do want to address, a little bit on the software side. Google is really interesting here because and I guess all three of you is you're dealing with sensitive payment information. You're also dealing with sensitive payment information and customer information, and then you're dealing with a little bit of the same as well. How does software kind of impact positively or negatively the repair process?
Yeah, I mean, that's critical for us, especially when you're in this, environment of a lot of authorized service providers. So, we put something out on our phones like last year, where we have a repair mode where, the biggest concern for us was you go into a third-party repair provider, and we were requiring that you have to wipe the data. That the repair technician had to say, I can't touch this until I wipe the data. It's a horrible experience. So, and really frustrating for customers. And we worked for a long time to solve that, and finally came out with this repair mode tool where basically it's just handing over the device, setting a passcode, hides all your data behind a wall. You hand it to the technician. They can do all the work, all the testing they need to do, hand it back to you, put in your passcode again, and you're set. So you're not wiping any data. You're up and running as quickly as possible. But that was a great solution. Really grateful to our software engineering teams that they could develop that type of capability, in addition to a lot of the other diagnostic tools that they developed for us, which are also critical to simplify the repair experience for technicians or for do-it-yourselfers if they want to.
Good.
I would say software hits in two areas for us. The first being calibrations, right? So you get a new display module, or you get a new haptic touchpad, and the environment that it's in, the device that it's connected to, is going to be different every time. So we work very closely with our software partners to make sure that calibration experience is as visible and quick and easy as possible. I think that's really important, especially as we try to get customers to repair their own devices, is that is as seamless and invisible as possible. And then the other is, our authentication process. So we have a strong internal mandate that we don't block any functionality, right? We have no software locks for replacement parts, but we still do want to validate that a battery is authentic, because that is an important safety component, or a PCBA is authentic. So I think those are the two big software parts when it comes to making spare part assemblies available.
And Sal, I think you guys have arguably the hardest challenge, which is, in my mind, I'm concerned about the payments. I mean, I can't even go into a grocery store without being worried that somebody didn't swap out the card reader. So how do you think about it?
Yeah, I mean, there's strict regulation around this. Sorry. With the PCI standards that control the credit card industry. So all our hardware has to be mandated. Anything that takes credit card information and even temporarily stores it in the device has to be PCI controlled. So anytime we are refurbishing, we have to look for that vendor that's going to refurbish to be PCI certified as well. And there's, our engineering teams will go out there and make sure, and our security teams will go out there and make sure that all those standards are being met. So yes, that is a key sort of factor for us. The other thing is that, mentioned wipeout, right? As soon as the device comes back, it has to be, especially the credit card readers and devices that have the credit card numbers run through them have to be wiped out. So that is mandatory. All the refurbishment vendors that deal with our devices know that. So we cannot mess with that, right? Because our own PCI certification comes into question. So that's something we deal with all the time. And I think the industry that we work in and the vendors that we work in understand that that's a critical factor for success.
How do you pick and decide what products, if you're a company that has multiple different verticals and business lines? Google, I think, has the Pixel lineup is very repairable, but my Nest Cam, I can't do a DIY repair. And I'm saying Nest because I noticed when I left my house yesterday that the sun has actually delaminated the front faceplate, but I can't get parts. So how do you decide this product we're going to make repairable, we're going to invest in creating this, and then this one we're just going to wait?
For us, it's a progression, right? I think the immediacy of the phone and the requirements of that had us really needing to focus intensively on solving for that. But the value of that is all that you create from that. Now that informs the other product teams, right? So now you have inroads into those product teams saying, hey, look at the value we're creating here. Look at the reception of this, right? Look at the legislative piece. There is a certain aspect of compliance now with right to repair legislation. That's a great tool to use, quite frankly, internally to say, hey, it's not just me saying this is something that we have to do. So you've got that piece of it. You've got the successes that you have from the customer and the business perspective of what you've done with your other categories. It's building the relationship, right? This is all internal relationships and convincing those engineers and the design teams that this really matters to our customers and to our business, and we need to go after it. So we continue to make progress across those other categories and expect to do so as we grow even more product categories.
You mentioned right to repair. I think it's a great pivot point to when you think about these repair programs, how much of it, and you mentioned certification standards, I think California is a state that has a right to repair law in effect. Oregon is another one that's coming into effect. Minnesota, Colorado, New York, there's a federal right to repair bill. To what extent do you think repair programs need to be driven by a regulatory requirement, which I think is never really good for businesses, versus it's the right thing to do, it's what we want to do, it's our company's priority, and how do they kind of work together?
Yeah. Okay.
I would say, so at least our approach, we are very much customer first, customer driven. So we have set ourselves up over the past few years, not in anticipation of any legislation that was coming, but making sure that we were able to meet the customers where they are and provide the best value to them. And that just happened to mean that when legislation came 4 years after that we were very well set up and we had very little to do to comply with coming legislation. So I would say that if you're focusing on your customers and providing the best value to them, you're going to be pretty well set up to make the small adjustments needed to comply with legislation.
Yeah, a similar message. I mean, Matt, I testified for the bill in Oregon as well as in Colorado, but a lot of it started with Oregon. That was the first bill that we felt was comprehensive, and it was a similar type of thing. It just aligned really well with how we were approaching repair from the beginning. And I remember meeting with the state senator sponsoring it, and she was a little reluctant at first. She's like, where are you going to land on this? And she explained to me all the aspects of the bill. And I explained to her that it perfectly aligns with how we think about the experience for the customer and all that. And I'll never forget, she looked at me and said, "You just made my Christmas card list." So it was just a great combination of where compliance and it's encouraging you to do the right thing and it aligns really well. But it's a useful tool, quite frankly. It's having that as well is just one more chip you have as you're having that negotiation with your design engineers, which it's always trade-offs. We get it. I mean, when I talk to the head of our product design teams, they'll tell me, you have a seat at the table. You're a part of the discussion, but it doesn't mean you're always going to win. And so I always want to win, and so I need as much as I can, and that's got to be a cost story. That's got to be a customer story. That's got to be a sustainability story. And if I get a little bit of a compliance story as well, great. That just helps reinforce the message.
We are at time. I want to be respectful of the next panel, but my last question to each of you is, if you had to look into the future with your crystal ball, what do you think the future of repair looks like in 2, 3, 5 years?
I'll go first. I think in the B2B type industry that we're in, I think hardware as a service will probably become more and more prevalent, and that means that refurbishment becomes imperative, because if the hardware is not owned by the business, then they're just, as the device either becomes older or has a problem, then we just provide them with a new device or a replacement device, and then the old one goes into refurbishment, and that's the only way you can make that successful. So I think that will be the future, especially in the B2B world. And then I think as we open up to global markets, there's a lot more appetite for using refurbished devices in more of the emerging economies, right? The cost factor becomes huge. So I think refurbishment becomes even more critical, and more hardware companies will have to realize full-blown refurbishment programs for that reason.
Two words: mainstream DIY. I really want to see a future where you can get into where it's not just a niche market, but you make products so repairable that if customers want to replace like a display or a battery, they can do that. And I think we're going to have to get there, because you're looking at supporting products now for 7+ years, the hardware and the software. That's only going to continue to grow. And over that period of time, you're going to need to replace things. And the more you figure out how to simplify that and enable customers to do that, the more of a relationship they'll have with your product, which also creates this great sense of loyalty that they'll have for the products that you create.
Just really quickly, I guess I would echo what Steve said a little bit earlier about a little bit of a trickle-down effect. Like, we target those high-value, like expensive laptops, for instance, first. And I think in 5 years, we're going to see a lot more of the cheap accessories, like starting to integrate repair features. Like, the more we see value in those high-end products, the more we're going to be able to like show the value in the low-end, like lower margin products, and bring that more broadly.
Thank you, guys. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.